What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we'll be going over some wide receivers that I would not be drafting this season. As always, doesn't mean I think they're bad players. I actually think everyone on this list is a good player, but we always need to think about a player's likeliest range of outcomes, but then also their ceiling, right? And compare that to what it costs to get them. And for today's video, I just don't see a need to draft them as early as they're going. Now, I'll only be going over a few players today, so if you want to see the full list of players I'd be avoiding, as well as players I'm targeting, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So, let's get things started off as usual, the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which 1,000-yard wide receiver last season ended with the fewest receptions, and the answer is DJ Moore. And Pinbin25 was the first to get that on YouTube, and @_Cwill1 was the first to guess that right on Twitter. Today's stat: Davante Adams led all wide receivers in weighted opportunity rating last season, but who was second? And if you didn't know, weighted opportunity rating is a really good metric. It basically just combines your target share with your share of air yards. So if you only look at one of those, you're not getting the full story. If you look at the weighted opportunity, you know, oh, he's getting a lot of targets and they might be coming deeper downfield. So let's talk about some wide receivers I would avoid. The first one is actually the entire team, and that's the Houston Texans. And realistically, this is not just wide receivers. We're putting a full fade on the Houston Texans' entire offense this season, all positions. David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, Mark Ingram, Watson, Brandon Cooks, Cobb, QT, Collins, just cross all of them off your list. It does look like, and this is the assumption, it does look like Watson isn't going to play for the Texans this season. So that is my baseline assumption. If somehow he receives no suspension, then reverse this take. Although I'll say this, still crossing off all of the running backs, still crossing off all the tight ends, still crossing off most of the receivers. So even if Watson plays this season, I don't love this team in general. The only one would probably be Nico Collins, but we'd have to see kind of where he's going. But I'm under the assumption that he's not going to be the quarterback, and if that's the case, just completely disregard this team. That is way too many running backs in general for just one of them to take over, right? Like, obviously, we don't love any of Johnson, Lindsay, Ingram when they're all capable. I don't think they're all going to have a big role, but they're all capable. They're all going to get some sort of role. Cooks is fine, but, you know, he was extremely inconsistent even with Watson. 28 now, 1 million known concussions. Like, I just don't really want to go there. Nico Collins, like I said, he's the only one that does intrigue me because I think he could be good, but, you know, it's nothing more than a late round dart throw. But overall, it's just pretty easy to just cross off all Texans players and just move on, right? You're investing in situations as much as you are in players, and this isn't a situation that I want to invest in. Another receiver that I would definitely avoid is Kenny Golladay. Now, Golladay is a great wide receiver, but there are absolutely more negatives than people are willing to accept. And the fact that he's being taken pretty close to where he went on the Lions is a little bit strange. On the Lions, he caught passes from Matthew Stafford, who, of course, is better than Daniel Jones. And when he broke out in 2018, 2019, they ranked 13th and 16th in pass attempts per game. Well, the Giants ranked 26th last season, even with Saquon injured. That's the big thing. With their lead back injured, they were still 26th in pass attempts per game. Just two teams ran fewer total plays per game than the Giants last season, and there's nothing to suggest that they want to change that. Right? They're going to play slow, and they're probably going to want to run the ball a lot with Saquon coming back, you know, and it's not like they're going to be an above average passing attack where you could look at a team like Seattle and be like, okay, they don't have very many total pass attempts, but they're so efficient, we don't care as much. No one's calling the Giants a super efficient offense to where the low volume can be made up for because Daniel Jones is so good. No. This is a mediocre offense, and you know what? For being a mediocre offense, they sure do have a lot of pieces, right? Like Barkley, Golladay, Ingram, Rudolph, Tooney, Slayton, Shepard. That is a ton of guys who are going to command some sort of target share with, again, Daniel Jones throwing them the football. In the 2 years with Daniel Jones at quarterback, no wide receivers have clipped 100 targets. And while Golladay will be the best receiver he's thrown to, everyone else is still there. Like, I'd get it if, Ingram and Slayton were just traded away, right? But they've kept everyone, and then they've added in Golladay and a first-round wide receiver. So Daniel Jones isn't throwing for 5,000 yards, and with Barkley healthy, Golladay probably isn't pushing much past 10 touchdowns. So with him currently going as like roughly the wide receiver 20, it's certainly possible he hits that, he pays off that ADP, but that would be on the high end of what we should expect. And I really don't see him like crushing that ADP. Now, maybe you feel differently. Maybe you think that they're not going to use Tooney for some reason. I don't really see a justification for that. Like, they clearly spent a first-round pick on him. They took him earlier than people thought they'd take a wide receiver, and they took him before other wide receivers people thought would get drafted. Like, they clearly like him. They clearly want to use him. But maybe you think they won't use him, and you think that maybe Slayton gets benched and they just don't use him at all, that Shepard is bad this season. Like, even if you think all those things are true, well, now what are you going to say about having Saquon Barkley back, having Evan Ingram there? Like, are you also going to say Evan Ingram's going to be bad? Like, everyone can't be bad. These guys are going to get targets, they're going to get looks, and it's not a good enough offense for Golladay to also crush. It's Daniel Jones, okay? He's not Matthew Stafford. I mean, just got to realize, if you take him, you're going to be frustrated with the production. Could have a few good weeks, but it's going to be kind of up and down, and it's just not going to be as many spiked weeks as you were hoping for, because our only prior with Golladay is playing in Detroit with Matthew Stafford, who's a very, very good quarterback, and he was one of the only targets. It was a very condensed target share, kind of just him and Marvin Jones over there. So it's very, very different situation, and it's a significant downgrade, so he should be downgraded a lot more than he has been in drafts. I'd also avoid drafting Deebo Samuel. If we look at this 49ers offense, it's Kittle at the top. That's very clear. He's the main weapon. And then I would probably consider the ground game like the number 2 weapon. We can't be positive exactly who it's going to be, but it kind of doesn't matter, right? Like, if it's Mostert, if it's Sermon, we don't care for this sake, for talking about Deebo Samuel. Just got to consider ground game as a unit, probably the number 2 option in this offense. Then after that, I personally think it's going to be Ayuk as the 3rd option. Now, this is the one decision point that I see, right? Everyone's going to agree that Kittle is great. And most people are going to see that the ground game is going to be efficient. It's going to be a solid piece in the offense. But if there's one decision point people have, it's who's that 3rd option going to be? I think that it's going to be Ayuk. But if you think Deebo is better than Ayuk and is going to have more looks schemed to him, because this offense kind of operates in that way, they go into the week saying, okay, we're going to try and get about like 40% of these plays schemed towards Kittle. And of course, a play can be schemed towards someone, but if they're not open, they still go to the other players. But this is an offense very much centered around that fact, where they're designing plays specifically to get certain players the ball. And so they're going to design, obviously, run plays, which are going to be mostly to the running backs. Of course, Deebo and Ayuk are going to get some carries, but mostly to the running backs there. They're going to scheme a lot of looks to Kittle, and it's who do you think is 3rd? Like I said, if you think Deebo is 3rd, getting more plays schemed to him than Ayuk, then you should be drafting Deebo and fading Ayuk. I personally don't think that's the case. I believe that Ayuk is going to be schemed more looks than Deebo Samuel, which is going to make Deebo very inconsistent, and it's not going to give him that much weekly upside, because while everyone's healthy, there's just not enough. So I think that is just the major point. There is not enough volume on this offense for whoever is like the loser, I guess, between Ayuk and Deebo to be viable in fantasy. It's got to be one of them. And for the people who say, well, what if they split the work, right? Because they do have similar skill sets. I think this is possible. So if they're getting even amounts of plays schemed to them, or basically saying, hey, they have a similar skill set, so we can create one play and just say, whichever player we want to go and be featured in that play, we can have it because they can run the exact same routes, they can be used in the exact same way. If you think that's the case, I would probably fade both of them. Ayuk goes a little bit too early for splitting that sort of work as the 3rd option to make him like Crusher's ADP. Deebo would be fine, but he would just have very little upside in that scenario. He'd kind of need an injury, and he's going a little bit too early to need an injury to pay off. So if you're under that thinking, it's fade both of them. Again, I personally am not. I think that Ayuk will be featured more than Deebo, and so I'll be targeting Ayuk and not targeting Deebo. But it's really up to how you think that's going to be. The final player we'll go over today is Will Fuller, and here's my issue with Fuller. He's very clearly in a worse situation than he was last year, so why is his ADP so close to what it was before? Like, people have always been terrified to draft him because he can't stay healthy, but they've been willing to spend, a mid-round pick or a mid to late round pick on him because the upside's so nice. Well, the risk is still there, if not higher, since he's a wide receiver changing teams now, but the upside is far lower because he was either, in the past, opposite DeAndre Hopkins, who was always seeing double teams, or he was the clear top option with Deshaun Watson, a quarterback, on a team with virtually no defense, so they just chucked it around every play. Now he plays with Tua, who is objectively worse than Watson. Even if Tua take a step forward this season, you have to admit he's not as good as Deshaun Watson is. As what? The fifth option? Because, he's behind Parker. He's probably behind Waddle, probably behind Gesicki. You got to say he's behind the ground game. They're going to use the running backs more. So how on earth is he going to be usable in fantasy? Remember, he doesn't come without risk, right? Like, he's already suspended for week 1. He's missed at least a month in every season since his rookie year. And as a result, he's never been over 900 receiving yards. Like, if you want to draft him in a best ball format, go for it. Like, if you really, really want shares in Will Fuller, draft him in best ball. But he's going to have like 3 or 4 good weeks and a lot of weeks that aren't as great. And it's going to be a nightmare to figure out when you should play him in a season-long format. And there's honestly a chance that he's only ending up with like 5 targets a week, and we're not even getting those 3 to 4 really, really nice weeks. Because do the math. Tua's going to throw the ball at best, 35 times a game, right? And so you think Parker's probably going to get around 8. If you give 6 to each of Gesicki, Fuller, Waddle, then 5 to the running backs, you're only left with like 4 to go to like secondary tight ends, other receivers that are going to rotate in, some weeks with more to running backs because 5's honestly not all that much. It's like, where is the upside for Fuller? Because he's not going to be the top targeted wide receiver in this offense, and giving him 6 is going to give you like 3 to 4 receptions for like 45 to 60 yards. And that's optimistic. That's assuming, he stays healthy for all these weeks. And that's assuming that he's on the same level as Waddle, who they just took, 6th overall? Every single scout that I've seen talk about Waddle is an absolute love with him. So, I wouldn't be shocked if he's closer to like 7 or 8 targets a week. And that's bumping Fuller down to like 4 or 5, making him a bust in every single week where he doesn't score a touchdown. So that's just not what I'm looking for in receivers. There are going to be other players in that range who offer more upside, a better floor, just an overall better outlook that I don't want to spend a mid-round pick on Fuller this year. So those are some wide receivers that I personally would not be drafting this season. If you want to see a complete list of players that I'm avoiding, as well as those who I'm targeting, you can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.